Welcome to this episode of Rich Lessons. We have a special guest, Miss Ashley Fox. I've known, actually, Savitra and I both have known Ashley for years. So she's not just a guest, she's also a friend. But on today's episode, we're going to talk everything from money to investing to Paris. So we are super excited. I know we give an intro to our guests, but I don't know, for Ashley, I feel like one, like when you've been to somebody's house for so many times, they're no longer a guest. So because she's a friend for so long, I'm going to actually ask her to give a little background on herself because I also feel like she's so amazing that I won't do her any justice. So first off, welcome, Ashley.
Hello, ladies.
Ashley!
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
In the building.
All right, Ashley, absolutely amazing. For those who don't know her backstory, I mean, Wall Street, she has a company now, Amplify, who is doing amazing things. But again, I feel like I won't do you any justice. So, Ashley, who is Ashley?
So she is this beautiful being in this space we call the world. So I am from Philly, went to Howard University, majored in finance, worked on Wall Street. That was always my dream. I ended up working with rich people all day. So I kept rich people rich for a living. Realized that for something we're using every day, it's not taught in our school system. So July 2013, I left my Wall Street job with the intention to serve the 99% that Wall Street often overlooks. Ended up losing everything. I kicked out my apartment, maxed out credit cards because I wanted to create this word called Amplify, which is a merging of the word empower and modify, with the intent to build that financial empowerment and to bridge that gap. Ended up moving out of my parents' home after living there for 2 years, really focusing and building Amplify and taking it to a place where we've created financial education programs in school systems, prison systems. We have our membership-based platform, which our members like to call like the Netflix of finance, which is the Wealth Builders community, where adults have access to financial tools and resources from investing in the stock market, planning for retirement, or building a financial legacy for your children in the palm of their hand. And again, my goal is just to bring that Wall Street knowledge to the everyday person. We have members in 20 different countries who've invested millions of dollars, but individuals who may not have gotten the financial tools and resources that our Wall Street clients did get, but do aspire to build wealth.
So you've built something absolutely amazing. And for us to know you, but now for our guests to know you, you've always had a really big vision for your company, for yourself. Where you are now, are you on track with your vision?
Absolutely. I think if you read my journal, back in 2011, I used to call Amplify it. And if you really read it, you'll see everything that we've done as a company and the lives that we've impacted, we are doing. I think me as a person, I always saw myself being the Wall Street client. And I realized that you have to invest in your own idea or in somebody else's idea. And I chose to go both routes. I invest in companies in the stock market, but I created my own idea. But when I think about it every day, sometimes you don't think about it or know it when you're in the midst of it. But when I think back to the things that I wanted, the places I wanted to go, the things I wanted to do, the lives that I wanted to impact, Amplify is doing exactly what I felt. Now it's actually on paper and we have a business, but absolutely. But I feel like I'm just getting started. But yes, to answer your question.
Just get started. Okay, so I don't want to jump too far ahead, but let's dial it back. Born, raised in Philly, here you are. You're on Wall Street. You realize, like, I'm keeping rich people rich. I want to bring it to the 99%. What did you feel even at that point though would be your biggest challenge of going from Wall Street to now saying, let me serve the 99%? Because we all hear the stories of the lack of financial literacy and the ups and downs, the pros and cons. Do people really understand it? How do we make it more accessible for you? Clearly you saw the opportunity, but also what was the challenge in going to the 99%?
To be honest, I didn't think there was going to be any difficulty. One, because at that point, entrepreneurship wasn't sexy. I ended up just leaving because I felt like I was here for something bigger. I had $30,000 when I quit. I had just got my real estate license, so just in case I could sell some properties. But as time progressed, one of the biggest things I realized is I still shopped, lived, and traveled like I had a job. So I thought money was going to come in every 2 weeks. And then when I realized when you're running a business, it doesn't work like that. But as time progressed, one of the hardest things I had to learn was that because I was so much into working with wealthy individuals, because you had to have at least $25 million to talk to us. I was so far beyond what was possible compared to what the everyday person thought they could do. And so I'm in the bank accounts of millionaires and billionaires, so I know what's possible for myself and the world. But when you're around people who didn't get that exposure, they're scared or they don't feel like they belong in a room. So actually at Amplify, we spend more time getting people to unlearn the belief systems that they grew up with or what they see on their television, on their timeline. And I got to a point where I saw so much for the customers we were serving, but they didn't see it for themselves. And I realized I had to meet them where they were. Interestingly enough, I think one of the best things that ever happened to me, now I can say this, but was when I got kicked out my apartment. Because I know what it feels like to avoid bill collectors. I know what it feels like to be trying to teach a subject of something that I don't even have, or to doubt, who I am and what I could do. But I think the one thing is that I could not unsee the wealth that Wall Street exposed me to. So I think that's what kept me going. But at one point in my career, I had to take a step back and say, maybe you're just a little bit too smart. Maybe you need to meet people and talk to them and meet them where they are, because they're seeing me as this vibrant, educated person. But that's also the fear that we have with the financial industry. We have a idea of what it is, and we don't feel like we belong. So how I started to dress, how I started to talk, and how I started to serve people led with more of the empowerment, which is the beginning of what Amplify stands for. And then it ended with the modify, which is where it changed. Because Amplify is a merging of the word empower and modify. But I was leading with education, education, education. And it's not that the world is missing education. We're missing the belief that we deserve the education, that we deserve to be in the room. So I had to love on people just a little bit more. And then we started to teach financial education.
Yeah, it's interesting because I started following you, one, because you're my soror, but also because you're such a good teacher. So the fact that you're like education, we have to educate people and remove that barrier from them. And then we could talk about this investing, et cetera.
Right.
How does that look for someone who is like fearful of investing? And we come from communities and places where we're very skeptical of even banks, of people having our money or putting our money other places other than in our pocket. You say your dad is keeping money underneath the mattress. Like, how do you break through that fear for people who are maybe they're thinking about it? Do they need to be thinking about it, or can you like educate and teach them and bring them to you?
I think the first thing is to understand that when you're investing, especially in the stock market, you're owning a piece of a company. Like, it's not just a price. It's not something that goes up and down. You're actually part owner of a business. So I always tell people, if I would ask you to invest in Amplify, what questions would you want to know about my company before you made the investment? The same questions you would want to know about my company is exactly what you would want to ask and look for within a publicly traded company. And all that information you can find on the internet. The other thing is, I think people have this preconceived perception that you have to have a lot of money, or because you don't have a lot of money, you're not good enough. And I always tell people, if you have $5, you can $5 your way to $1 million, but you'll never get there if you don't ever start. And so I always tell people, be more embarrassed that you don't start at all than starting small, and really getting people to that point, because it's always an identity thing. Because it's always tell people too, also, it's like reading the back of a medicine bottle. If you read the back of a medicine bottle, you don't know what that stuff is, but it just says, it's for a headache. But a doctor knows what that is. They know that language. So the more you become fluent in the language of money, the easier it becomes, the less angst that you have. But you have to speak it, read it, and embrace yourself within it.
I love that. Because I'll give you an example. Like, I know Capway FinTech, that's the finance, the piece that we have in common. We didn't do investing clearly, but I will always tell people, start with what you spend your money on every day.
Correct.
It was, you just pay, $200 these days, $300 for some Jordans. Like, that's Nike stock. Like,
Right.
So, for you, and I know that part of this is you should just join Amplify. But for the purpose of this podcast, is that where you kind of start with your members? It's like, start with where or is there a more simplified way for you that you feel is that you more so introduce?
First, you pick the number. What can you commit every 2 weeks where it doesn't force you to feel like you have no money, but it pushes you to make a difference? And I would say at least $5. The other thing I tell people to do is, like you mentioned, make a list of, from the moment you wake up till you go to sleep, what companies actually make money off of your existence. When I think about the first 90 minutes of my business, of my life, when I wake up, from my phone to the apps I use when I pick up my phone, to the soap I use, to the toothpaste, to the clothes I wear when I go to the gym, to the network I watch when I'm on the treadmill watching TV. We literally go through billion-dollar companies, and it's like the first 90 minutes of my life. These companies make money off of me, and I have no desire to stop using these companies. But what if I owned a piece of these companies? Because chances are, if I'm the consumer, millions of people are too. And chances are it's probably a multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar business. And it got that way because of their consumers. So when we think about who gets our time, our money, and energy, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure out the biggest companies in the world, right? You don't need a rocket scientist to tell you what companies America can't live without, because you can't live without them. Or if we're in a recession, there's still things you're going to have to buy and utilize. They're still going to be able to make money, because at the end of the day, there is no stock market without the consumer. If we stop spending and stop putting our money in the banking system, there's no America. So we have a way bigger fear if we all just stop spending money, but we don't have a problem with spending money. We have a problem with building wealth. And so that's what we work to build and fix.
Yeah. Something that you mentioned as far as like who you serve, obviously you mentioned the 99%, but you also talked about going into prisons. And I remember we were in New York one time and you were telling me about this. And I was like, that's amazing, right? But what does that look like? And I'll say this. I was at a luncheon and Jamie Dimon was speaking, and he said one of the biggest disservices we have done as a people is how we have treated those who are coming out the prison system. And that's like the biggest ball that we have dropped thus far. And so knowing that you have been kind of seeing that opportunity to help, to service, to educate, to make mindful those who are inside of the prison system years ago, right? And he's talking about this today. So what does that look like for you? What does that look like for them?
That was actually one of the hardest things I probably ever had to do in life. And that was, interestingly enough, going back to your question, that was actually one of the first times in my life where I felt like, I don't know if I could do this. Because at that point in my business, I had worked with ultra high net worth people. I had taught in the public school system, and then I went in the prison system. So I could thoroughly connect how America operates, from the wealthiest people to the poorest children to the prison system. And it's so much bigger than just financial education, because it's so much program. Like, I would work with the guys that I was teaching in the prison system, and parts of me didn't want them back out in the streets, but I also didn't want them locked up in the prison system. But the only way that we can break that barrier is by having some sort of wealth. And it's like, I can give you, you can go get a job, but again, it's going to be hard to get a job, but you have to be able to create something and have an ownership mindset. And I did the best that I could. And I remember I would cry almost every single week leaving out the prison system, because it was so much more than just teaching them what a stock was. I had to tell them that they mattered, because in reality, they didn't even feel like they had a life in prison, and they were used to being in prison. And they thought that prison was the cool thing to do, especially because they had came out of Rikers. And so for me, it just gave me the mental fortitude to keep going, because I think it's not just what we're teaching people, it's what we represent. So just even being a woman who worked on Wall Street, who built a business, who had money, being in there, they don't get to see that all the time. They definitely didn't get to see women. And so that represented something for them, to show them what was possible, because I believe I could be a billionaire because I was in the bank accounts of billionaires. I believe I can have wealth because I was on Wall Street every single day. But if you don't see those things, subconsciously your mind doesn't even believe you deserve it or that you can obtain it. So how can I bring Wall Street to the everyday person through how I live, through what I do, through what Amplify teaches, in a way that meets them where they are, but shows them the direction that they could go.
Yeah, so you talked about, those pivots in your life, and Wall Street to teaching to the prison system, but then also being kicked out and figuring things out. One of your pivotal moments that stands out to me is your move to Atlanta.
Okay.
So I was living in Atlanta, and I think at the time you were in New York.
Yes.
And I remember you came down to Atlanta, and you were in this space of like, I'm building this company. Like, I know what I want it to be, but like, do I raise money? Do I not raise money? Is New York, like, cause you are like, New York, New York, New York, New York. He's like, so is New York my place? Like, I don't know. And I don't know, maybe a 2 hour, I don't know. It was like a long conversation. And you tell me now, like, that conversation was a pivotal moment for me. So love you to kind of expand on that.
So I was at a point when I was living in Philly. So when I got kicked out, moved back to my parents' house. I slept there for 2 years, moved out, and moved not too far from my parents. And I was there for maybe 5, 6 years. That's really where I built Amplify. But I never wanted to be back home in Philly. I got kicked out, so I had no choice but to go back to Philly. And I felt like my cup was empty. So I decided that I wanted something different. I felt depleted. So I went back to the one place that I knew filled my cup. And I was going to go to New York. And it was COVID at that time. And so I needed to just get away and be in a space that was unfamiliar to an unfamiliar version of Ashley. So I was living in Paris for about 4 months.
We're going to get into.
But when I came back from Paris, I had already said I wasn't signing my lease, of which I tried to get back, but they told me no. So I was like, I gotta go to New York. So at this point, I have no money. I have an American Express card. I booked the Airbnb 24 hours before I had to go to New York. I had to be out that place. And I randomly just lived in this horrible Airbnb, cried the whole month. And I'm living in New York. I think I was there for about 8-9 months, because I knew I was going to get that floor to ceiling window apartment, but I was not moving until I got what I wanted. And so I had an event in New York. But at that point, New York was not the same. So we're coming out of COVID. I didn't know what was happening in my life. So you and I are talking. And so I'm like, should I raise money? Because at this point, there's nobody on payroll. We still selling people. And we have our membership app. And I'm just trying to figure it out. Because I also felt like at that point, I'm not the finance girl. Like, I'm here to build the business that financially impacts the world. I don't want to be the stock girl. And I felt like my identity was changing. You and I talked, and so I'm like, okay, do I raise money, right? Because I also, in the time when I left Wall Street, venture capital wasn't a big, first of all, the internet wasn't a big thing, right. But our clients were investing in VC funds and private equity funds, but it wasn't all over the internet. So I didn't even think that I could go ask anybody to help me build Amplify. I just figured I had to thug it out. Yeah. And so when I see you guys raising money, so I'm like, well, what's this raising money thing? Like, I know what it means to own equity in a business, but I don't know what it means to get access to money when I don't even know what I'm doing. And so I'm contemplating that because I know I don't have money. Mm-hmm. And so I remember this is so crazy because you were like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get engineers. You're going to do this. It's going to cost you this. You're probably going to raise this much. Probably about a year, 2 years, you're probably worth about $20 million. And I'm just like, but in that conversation, I'm uncomfortable. And the last time I felt that discomfort was on Wall Street. As a Black woman walking onto the floor, surrounded by people of all nationalities, serving these wealthy people, I just felt like I didn't fit in, but I thrive off of that discomfort. Because when I'm around people who are smarter than me, it forces me to rise to the occasion. So I'm like, this is uncomfortable, Sheena. 20 million? Like, what does that even mean? And I'm like, I've never paid anybody 200,000. What is she talking? But she's saying it's so fluent, like it's just coming out. So I'm like, you can tell she did this before. And I'm like, me? Like Ashley? Having a team or like, and I don't know how we got on conversation, but you mentioned like, well, you could do it in Atlanta because it's going to be expensive in New York. So I'm like, Atlanta? Like, I never cared about it. And so after that conversation, it did something to me because in that moment, as soon as we left, I said, I said, you remind me of Wall Street. And I realized that I went back to New York looking for that Wall Street feeling, thinking it was in that location. And it's like, hey, I'm not in New York, but I feel like I felt on Wall Street, but I'm in Atlanta, which means I could be anywhere. So where do I really want to be? So I'm like, Atlanta. So I go home. And I'm like, I'm still thinking about it on a plane. I'm crying on a plane because I'm still lost. I don't have any money.
What's your sign? Because the crying. Okay. What's the sign? I was like, it's going to be a Cancer or something in there because the crying. Let it out, girl. Let it out. Okay.
This is also post-therapy, actually. So in 2017, that's when I started to go to therapy. So like, I realized also I was holding all my emotions in, and I had to learn how to allow it. Whether I was angry,
it's beautiful
sad.
People let their emotions out. By the way, I'm just saying.
So I go to New York, and I'm like, Atlanta, and so I'm like, let me just go to sleep. So I wake up, go to sleep, and I'm walking because I walk everywhere. And I was like, yeah, this ain't it. And so, interestingly enough, the following month, we had made more money than we had ever made. We had closed our first B2B contract with our members, with our Well-Builders Community app. And I applied for the equivalent apartment that I wanted in New York City, in Atlanta, and I just moved. Like, I literally packed all my stuff in my Airbnb, and I literally moved. I drove from New York in my car with our marketing director that's still with us to this day, and I drove to Atlanta, and I just moved into the equivalent apartment, and it was probably the best decision I had ever made in life. But I also think, too, because Atlanta was slow. And I'm like hustle, bustle, New York. Yeah. But at this point, I'm in my 30s. And I'm like, in order to build what I want to build, I'm not hustling anymore. I need to slow down to get bigger. And I don't know what that means because that freaks me out. but you might as well try that in Atlanta because that's not what New York embodies. And so all the pieces just kind of align because of that little one conversation that made me uncomfortable about that $20 million value. You know, like, but to this day, I tell that story all the time. And I'm like, I was talking to this woman and she made me realize this, but it made me realize that I was looking for a feeling and not a location.
I think we were talking. I think I told you like something like your pre-valuation, or like she was like, "What are you talking about?" So, but Atlanta's lucky to have you.
Yes,
Absolutely.
So, location.
Yes, and so you mentioned something, and that was that you did like a stint in Paris, and I already told you that I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. And I called it like your love affair with Paris, because it is definitely one of your happy places that you go. And it is very clear. Like when I see you head to Paris, I said, oh, my girl, she headed to Paris, She about to go to her favorite places. She about to go to her favorite restaurants, She be whether you be with your family, your friends, whatever. I love to see Ashley in Paris. Okay, the cameras need to just follow her around because you do it well, and it really, you can see like the joy when you're there. But originally, what brought you there was like grief, and we both have passing of one of our parents in common. And you went there to kind of like as a retreat, right? But what brought you to Paris, and what made you like fall in love with Paris?
So the first time. So I actually been to Paris a couple times when I was in my just traveling Wall Street, had money days. The first time I went to Paris, I was in a space where I felt like the universe was removing everything that didn't serve me. So at the time, I felt like you're stealing everything from me that I'm used to having. So my body was rejecting foods. My body stopped. I couldn't drink alcohol. My relationships with my friends from the past were changing. I had broke up with my ex in a previous relationship, and I was like, I can't do this. Like, I didn't know I just didn't know who I was. And interestingly enough, nobody knows this, I used to be afraid of the term CEO. Like, that made me so uncomfortable. I couldn't see myself being somebody's CEO. And now that I'm older and, a few years later, I actually was afraid to become the woman I am today. And I was grieving the loss of who I used to be. So in that moment, I was like, okay, I don't know who I am. I don't know anything anymore, but I need to go somewhere and embrace this new version of me in a new location. So I booked the one-way ticket. It was $300. They had literally, Paris had just opened up, and I'm gonna just go. I didn't know when I was ever coming back. I lived off of American Express credit card, and I just was living. Every 10 days, I lived in a different location in Paris, and that was the first time that like there were no pictures, I had no team. And like, I just called it like my letting go because I didn't know who I was. Like, I would cry. I would cry. And I would just walk the street in my little golden goose sneakers that I have to this day. But it was the first time that I just let go. I stopped trying to be this perfect person and accepted that I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. And so I was there for about 3-4 months, came back, and I was in New York. That's when you and I connected. And so when my dad passed away, I didn't want to do anything. And so my dad had passed away the top of 2023. So I had lived in Atlanta for about like a year, and we were killing it in business. Like, everything was cool. And my dad passed away. My whole life changed. So I was out my business for 6 months, and I didn't even know who I was again. And then I didn't know if I was ever going to go back. And so at that point, my dad passed away right before my birthday. And so I was like completely numb. So the following year, my birthday was horrible. Like, I just was sad. I just like, it was just bad. And so I never knew if I could celebrate my birthday, like, and have fun again because it was so close to my father passing. So the following year, I was like, all right, I don't want to be on the couch in Atlanta, but I have to accept that I will cry. But I don't know how I'm going to feel because with grief, you just don't know.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, if anything, I would just rather cry in Paris.
Yes.
So
I'm not mad at it.
I'm like, if you're going to cry in Paris.
Yes.
And I hadn't been back since right after COVID. So I went to Paris. My boyfriend came with me. I brought my team with me. And it was like, but I gave myself so much space to just be. And I was actually happy. Now, I did the crying. I gave myself space. But it was like, I was a different person. And I was a lot more mature and a lot more at ease. And then I had the best time of my life.
Yes.
And then I went back because I wanted to go. This is interesting. Actually, no, I went to go watch tennis, and then I went again. I just keep going back to Paris.
And you were there for your birthday.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was the trip.
So what is about Paris? What is
I don't
it?
know. I think if I could try to articulate it in words, I think Paris saw me in my most vulnerable and authentic state, and it was just beautiful at that point. Like when you let go of thought, when you let go of having to be this person, and you're just walking around, nobody knows you, and you're just there. Like, and so I don't know what about Paris was so beautiful, but in that moment, I became the Ashley I am today. So that evolution of Ashley, a piece of her was formed in Paris.
Yeah.
So like when I go back, it's just, even just planning a Paris trip just brings me so much joy. And it's interesting because I remember when I was in one of my sessions, my spiritual advisor, she was like, what brings you joy? So I'm like, teaching kids. I'm saying all this stuff about my business. She's like, no, what brings you pure joy that has no direct correlation to anybody else's happiness? And I was like, And it took me a really long time. And I realized at the time it was tennis, my niece in New York. And then as time progressed, it became tennis, my niece, and Paris. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes time for me to intentionally be happy, where it's not directly correlated to anybody else, there's no pressure, it's either tennis, my niece, and Paris. And every year the French Open happens, so now I get two happinesses, tennis and Paris. And it's crazy because now I want to take my niece to Paris. And for me, it's just, I spent so much time not being happy that it's like, how do I intentionally put myself in spaces that bring me joy? Because I do so much, I get stressed out. There's a lot of pressure on me, and Paris refills my cup. And so I intentionally go because, one, I now know that helps me be a better business owner, but it just makes me happy. And I can literally do nothing in Paris and just walk all day, and I will be completely happy. And I think finding those moments that bring you joy took some time to dig and get to, but I realized that Paris is one of them. So I'll go to Paris in a heartbeat. To me, it's an investment now in my mental and my physical well-being. But I just love it. I don't know.
I'm not sure if you've ever read any of like James Baldwin's his writings on his time in Paris, but that's what it reminds me of. So I'm gonna send you something.
Okay,
yes.
like that.
I think when you're like, I don't know what it is, but it reminds me of how he talked about Paris when he was there, and he would go to Paris. He would leave New York, Harlem, and he would spend like long stints in Paris.
Oh, wow.
And so he talks about like what Paris meant to him. And if you go to Paris now, there's like some dedications and like spaces where they'll show you like where he stayed, and you can actually like stay in some of the places that he stayed in Paris. But I'm gonna send you something on that because I think you'd be like, oh, this is the feeling that I had.
Yes.
So Paris clearly is that's your place.
Mm-hmm.
But you are also someone when it comes to your health, your mental health, and we'll talk about your physical health also, but your mental health, you're also like, you're that person like, look, I don't mind going on a solo vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So is for you, have you found the best release for you is just travel, like solo time travel, whether Paris or somewhere else?
Mm-hmm. It's interestingly enough, I only used to travel because I saw rich people do it. So I would go where our clients would go to fill my cup to remind me I'm gonna be wealthy. And I think as I got older and I started to learn more about Ashley, I started to be intentional to what made me feel like Ashley was a better person. Not because she was going to be rich, or not because other people did it. And I learned that water brings me peace. So like, I know how to swim, but I don't care to get in the water, but I will sit in front of it for hours, or I will walk the beach for hours. And that's another thing that just fills my cup. And so I think I just got really good at knowing every 90 days I have to fill my cup up. Because as I evolve and I create these big goals and I do more, my cup gets empty because, I mean, every day I wake up, which I think is absolutely insane, but I've accepted that I want to change the world. Like, my mere existence is going to show the world that you could build wealth, but you don't have to be in entertainment. You don't have to be in sports. You can utilize your intellect and build wealth. And I'm the woman that's going to show you. And I've accepted that that's who I am for the world. But it's sometimes I wonder like how crazy I am to really want to do that, because some people don't even know that they're in their own way or argue for their own limitations. Yet I wake up every single day. It was you that told me this. You got to be an insane person to run a business. And but I've accepted I'm insane, but this is my calling. You couldn't pay me to stop. But because of that, I know that I'm still human. So it's like when I find an area of deficiency or an area where I need help, I'm going to utilize my resources to the best of my ability. And I realize that being around water or Paris within a 90-day time span gives me the energy I need to come back to continue to grow as an individual. It's interesting because I used to always go to Miami. I would always go to Miami and stay at
Yes,
I would say the St. Regis or the Ritz in Bal Harbor. And I've been doing that for years. But because I have a very strict diet, I feel like I've eaten everything on their menu and I wanted to go somewhere else.
Yes.
But I didn't want to go too far down the strip because I didn't want it to be loud. And so interestingly, not too long ago, literally like a couple weeks ago, no, like last week, I asked my assistant to find me the equivalent to what, like, I don't want to travel more than 3 hours. I need to stay in a nice place with a beachfront. And so I went to the Cayman Islands. So that might be my new Miami. And I loved it. And I ate all the different foods that I was able to eat. But like it was exciting, but I actually absolutely did nothing. I walked the beach for 2 hours. I slept. I went to the gym. And I was like, it's interesting how like 26-year-old Ashley like was totally outside. 36-year-old Ashley is like, no, I want to stare at water and do nothing. Like, I didn't do my hair.
You sound like me.
So
And I love, you talked about meditation, right? And the sound of like the ocean gives me like that calming feeling where I feel like I can go into like meditation. I go into that state. And I am so that person. Like, I'm a solo trip girl. Sheena don't like flying, so I don't know. The plane is gonna be anxiety ridden for her.
But this is even when it was like, where to next? I told her, I was like, it got to be water, like Miami, LA, but with LA, it's like water's right there. It has to be. And I don't know, even with Miami, I don't know if it's my favorite place, but I told Savitra, I was like, even for like 6 months to a year, I just want to be able to go in 2025, knowing it is my rebuilding year. I just want to go and build and look at water. Like, I don't care about anything else. I just want to wake up, look at water every day. I was in Miami. I don't only want to look at a place if it has floor to ceiling windows and it's looking at water. And again, Miami might be a 2025 thing for me, and I'm over it next year. But because of all the stuff that happened in 2023, the ability to help rebuild in 2024, I knew 2025 was my year, but similar. It's like I need to be somewhere that I can look at water, and that's going to help me, the continuing of me rebuilding who I am in 2025. So I feel you on but we're Pisces, so that's our excuse.
Yeah.
We're fish. We love water.
But I also feel like people who are in like conscious of their health and like their well-being also like being close to water or like being near like large bodies of water. I just like see that consistently in a lot of stuff that
I never told this story, but I actually wasn't going to speak on the fact that Capway shut down. Like, I was going to like just let it be. Like, if you knew, you knew, and if you didn't, you figured out. And I talked about what I was doing next, whenever that was going to be. And I was actually at a friend's house, and I was overlooking water. I had zero plans to do this, and it was just like the serenity of it, the peacefulness of it. I just got on LinkedIn and was like, and sent it out. And I had zero plans of actually telling it. And Savitra was like, that was good that you did that. You did it. I want to do it, And I was like, well, I technically had zero plans of doing it. Right. And it was the peacefulness of water. And it was like, I just want to release it because it was like, it had been such a burden. Of like no one knowing unless he was like,
well, it's interesting because once you did it, I was like, man, maybe I should have did that.
He was like, maybe I should have did that. But I had so I 100% I feel you because it was literally the fact that I was looking at water. It was such a beautiful morning, and I was like, I'm gonna release this. Like, I'm gonna get it off me because, of course, we've told the story before, but that depression, that gaining weight, getting my health back, but it was looking at water, and I was like, this is it for me. Like, this is the last piece for me to be like, this is what it is.
Yeah. But I think it goes back to the idea of like, and I talked about this when we were having dinner around like building in silence, doing everything in silence. And sometimes that can like hurt you because people don't know how to help you. And so at some point, it's like, what do you say? What don't you say? Who do you reach out to? Who don't you reach out to? But at some point, you're going to need like help. and you're going to need someone to like pour into you or give you guidance. And so it's always like that balancing act to see what's going to help you and what's going to hurt you.
Yeah. And how has it been for you? Because you've built a lot by yourself. And listen, being a solo founder, wearing 12 million different hats, you have not only yourself, your team, you have a huge community. So, like, how has it been for you?
And also, can I say, you are the most visible private person. Baby, if
like,
you follow
she got
Ashley,
keys, like, what is this?
you're the most visible private person that, period, online has to be.
This is like my boyfriend just told me that this morning. It's very hard, but I think I choose hard. But it's interesting because I used to be like that. I used to build in silence, and then at some point I had to just let it out. And I realized once I started to go and do publicity, and people used to reach out to me to go on TV, that's when I realized who I was meant to become, but I knew I wouldn't have been able to be sane while doing it. And I think every little point in my life where there's an area I need help, I'm actively looking. Like, I read this book called Celestine Prophecy when I left Wall Street, and it's about this guy who goes to Peru in search of these life insights. And so he doesn't know what he's looking for, but he knows he's looking for something, but he's following the clues to get him to his destination. And for me, when I recognize there's something that I need to find within me or something I don't know, I'm actively always looking, and I'll find the resources, the people to be able to help me. But I spent over $250,000 on me, on my mental health, on my physical health, and it's really about what brings me the most. It's something as simple as, and this ring.
Yeah.
I knew it before.
I
knew it. The aura ring.
Before.
So how you say it, aura?
But I like to look nice, but I literally get stressed out in my closet. You will see if I have to pick out my own clothes, it will spike up and it'll turn red because it stresses me out.
You have a stylist though.
But I don't have a wardrobe manager.
Okay.
So first, my coach told me, fly your stylist out. She can pick out your outfit. I said, He's like, yeah, I have clients like that, but his clients are billionaires. I don't walk around talking to billionaires all day to know that you can actually pay someone to help you pick out your clothes. I didn't know that. But then I did that, the stress went down. But now I have all these clothes and they're just, I got to get it tailored, but I'm always having to be dressed, which again, I'm totally fine with. But now it's like, I need help. And it's like, okay, well, you need a wardrobe manager. It's like, well, what do they do? And so now I'm putting the infrastructure to make sure that Sunday to Sunday, people know my schedule and know what I need to wear to ensure that I don't have the stress, because that's not conducive to my health. And so I pay a lot of money for coaches and just people, mentors, and my therapist, spiritual advisor, and just like I did sound healing when I was in the Cayman Islands, because I'm now learning I need to be still. And this ring is telling me that I'm going crazy every day. But I also learned about myself too, that I'm addicted to crazy. Like my normal state is chaos. Like, I like chaos. And it's just like, well, I can't do that because I'm seeing how it's impacting me as a leader. I'm seeing how it's just impacting my health. And it's like, this isn't worth my well-being because of something that I'm programmed to believe. But when I think of wealth, I don't think of peace. I think of someone who's sharp, but it's like, what if the same way I built Amplify, something the world has never seen, what if I can become a CEO that the world has never seen? What does it look like if I travel to Paris, if I'm healthy, if I'm at peace, if I'm calm, but I still can create the success that I want? And so I think after a while, it becomes a habit. I don't know how to not work on Ashley, because I saw what happened when I did, and I want more of that. Like, I saw how I opened myself up to love, and I'm in love with my partner now. But I remember Ashley in her 20s wouldn't let anybody get close to her because she just was afraid of love, and that I had to learn through therapy. So I've seen what happens when you work on you, when you heal you, and you fix those areas. It's just that every other quarter, I find a new area that I got to improve on. And I think I'm used to that. It's hard, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So I just now have to make peace with the fact that I choose hard, but I also am always going to have the resources I need. And if I don't actively have them, I'm comfortable enough and confident in my ability to go out and figure it out. But at this point, it's a standard. Like, if at any moment I need help, this is not, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. If I'm stressed out here and I have anxiety here, it's going to show up in my relationship. It's going to show up in my health. It's going to show up in front of my team. It's going to show up in front of the world. And what good am I if I don't take care of Ashley? Then I can't fulfill my purpose on the world. So everything is kind of like directly correlated. So at any moment when I need help, I don't always have the answer, but I always end up getting the answer. And at least if I was a stock, that is my performance track record of how like it's always been.
I'm definitely buying some of that. And next time you're in New Orleans, I'm going to bring you to my holistic gym.
Ooh.
And it's like they have sound bath, meditation, they have plunge pools, they have an Olympic-sized pool that's heated. It's all about holistic lifestyle. They have a completely natural built-in cafe. And people are like, you go out to that little bougie uppity gym. I love that gym. Y'all have no idea. But that's the investment in yourself, right? That you make
And
for your peace and your mind, your body, and all the things that matter.
That's non-negotiable for me. Like, if I can't, like, I had a coach. At one time, he was very expensive, and it's like, he coaches billionaires. Like, I know some of his clients, it's kind of like, and he wants to coach me. So it's like, imagine what I get access to. Like, I'll sit and have conversations like, is how I feel normal? He's like, absolutely. And so the things that he tells, like, he's the one that told me to get the ring. And I was just like, where did you get this idea? He's like, I follow successful people and I coach them. And I'm just like, just keep on telling me what they're doing. But immediately I went and got the ring. And I'm just like, why didn't I have this all my life? But I needed to pay someone thousands of dollars to get access to that information. And to me, I'll find the money because I know I'm worth the investment.
So before we get out of here, we always ask our guests the exact same question. Well, technically, Savitra asked the question, so I feel like it's like standard that you have to ask the question. So,
I don't know. It's not standard. I have to ask this question, by the way, people.
I'm making it standard.
But
it's like,
we talk about rich lessons, and I always kind of define it by rich lessons can be something that costs you everything or something that costs you nothing, but it's something along the way that you learn that has been like irreplaceable. Now, you didn't drop a lot of rich lessons already today, but what is that one thing that always sticks with you? And it's like, man, I'm happy I learned that. Like, that was like a rich lesson in life.
It's funny, we were talking about it at dinner. I think, and this just happened. So I have a lot of rich lessons.
Yes.
But the most recent rich lesson is you get to a point in life where you want to make money, right? Like, you want to make your first $1 million, and then, you hit your first $1 million, but then you want $100 million. And you're able to do things financially, but being in finance, because I worked on Wall Street, because I'm obsessed with spreadsheets, because I understand numbers, because I pay attention to detail, I never knew what a CFO was. And I thought I could be one. Like, if you hired me, I've been CFOs of organizations because I'm just good at numbers and most people aren't. And I think it got to a point where there was a point in the business where so much money was coming in and going out, and I just couldn't keep up with it. And I watched how at a point in my business needed me. And I had to use my stocks. And it kind of was like, I done worked too hard to get to a point where it's like, what did I do wrong, right? Like, I thought I did this right. I'm in finance. Like, I'm not struggling anymore. I'm making money, but like, what happened? And that feeling made me resent my business a little bit because it's like, why are you worrying about my money now? I've been working hard. I finally got paying myself and doing things. And that's when I was told by one of my coaches, like, you've never been to this point where you had this much money, but personal finance is not corporate finance. And I never knew the difference until I got to a space which I'm at in my business now, where I can't make decisions if I don't know my numbers. But I also cannot handle all the numbers. I need somebody who lives, sleeps, eats, and breathes these types of things. Because I could put together a spreadsheet, but I couldn't forecast a financial budget.
Right.
I couldn't determine my future cash balance. I can't see my own patterns. I just know every dollar we make, I want to put it back into my business. But just because I'm making a bunch of money, because I was a top line revenue girl, like, I can make the money, but it's like, and I just want to hire the people, but not realizing that people cost money. Benefits cost money. If I got it, I got it, and I'm going to spend it. And it's like, I wasn't negligent. I was just inexperienced. And this is the first time where it's like, I'm pushing. I spent a lot of money, 6 figures on a CFO infrastructure, to now say, I need you to tell me how much I need to make to do the things I want to do, because you can't tell me I can't do it because I'm going to go out and make the money. I just need you to tell me how much I need to make to ensure that I can hit the goals and do the things I want to do with the money that we do make. Because it's just so interesting. You just think making money solves, at least back then, it solves all your problems, but it's like, I have completely different problems now.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, I like the money problem I had when I was struggling as a business wasn't the money problem that I had trying to make sure I can continue to scale the business. And you hear about it, and I've heard you guys talk about it, but when you're in it and this is your business now, this is your money, this is your responsibility. In that moment, I had a little guilt. I had a little like, here you go again. Like, how are you making money mistakes and you're the money girl? But I learned that I will never do that again. And I'll be very conscious of how I spend our money. And I won't lose a desire to keep on spending it, but I will pay top dollar for people to tell me when I can spend it and what I need to do to hit those goals.
Yeah. And we talked about that, right? Like the idea that sometimes you need people who have done it in other spaces and they've done specifically the thing that you aren't a master of,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm a big person of like doing what I do best and then like outsourcing the rest, as they say. And finance is also not my strong point in business. And even with my new company, I'm like, okay, one of my first hires is gonna be someone over finance, because just what you say is right. It's like I need to know every day in an early startup how the money's moving in and out,
Yeah.
right? So that's the biggest rich lesson I like to hear, because it just like reaffirms a lot of what people go through every day, and they think like, oh, I should know this. It's like maybe not.
Yeah, but according to my coach, there was no way for me to know this.
Yeah, right.
But in that moment, any mistake in my business, I'm working on the judgment, but it's like, it's mine. If I have a bad employee, I decided to hire you. And I think also accepting like I'm doing my best and I'm trying to do something I've never done before and giving myself a little bit of grace, because I do put a lot of pressure on myself, which is why I have all these coaches, but I think that also helps me grow stronger as a person. But listen, money, and I could make it. Just let me run. But at a certain point, it's not about making money anymore. It's making the money and managing the team and hiring the people and leading the people and leading the person that is giving you the financial information. You know, it's just so many things that you think in the beginning you have problems, but it's like as you evolve, I don't think the problems ever go away. You just get better at mastering and solving the problems and becoming a better person. So that was an actual rich lesson.
Yes.
That I learned when I had to have the money to learn the lesson.
Well, I have one more before I let you go. This was something that Savitra and I talked about on a previous episode. For Ashley, not for business. For
Okay.
Ashley, what is your number? What is your number that says, once I hit this number for me, I don't need to do anything else. Nothing else matters. I can go off into the sunset.
First of all, Sheena is obsessed with this concept. She don't have a number, by the way. That's her answer. She don't have a number.
But for you, especially the finance person and a person who
is there a number? Is the question. Like, that was what we're discussing. Is there a number?
Is there a number?
So I have a number, but it's not an Ashley number. It's an Amplify number.
Mm-hmm.
Because if Amplify hits the number, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Because it was I never did this for money. You can't tell me I'm not going to be a billionaire, right? Now, I might have some doubts about being a CEO, but you can't tell me I'm not going to build $1 billion business, because I'm not going to stop. But my number is $3 billion.
$3 billion. It's about Amplify on the way.
Let's say, just in case, as of today, the answer is no. I do decide to raise capital, right? If I own a third of my business, I will still come out as a Black $1 billion woman, regardless of who made money because of Amplify. I think I want the world to see that happen, and that matters to me. Now, like, we might hit $3 billion. I might own all my company. Who knows? But I want to be able to come out and say Ashley Fox touched $1 billion. She's not just worth $1 billion, but she touched $1 billion. And that, to me, as a Black woman, if I left that on the world, I made a difference. And that, to me, matters. And as a result of what I do with $1 billion, I don't know, because I know I don't need $1 billion. It's what that represents to the people that I serve, to be able to see and let them know what's possible, because now I became that Wall Street client that people don't get to see when I lived in New York City. So that, to me, is what matters. But from a financial standpoint, I'll probably be there next year. But
yeah.
Love it. Right. So I hope I answered. I think I answered.
You did.
Ashley, thank you so much as a guest, as a friend, financial guru. We appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to come and be a guest on Rich Lessons.
Thank you for having me.
Bam. Until next time. Peace.